Released in 2011, Star Wars The Old Republic is an MMO that was touted as being the next WoW killer because of the budget, scale, and IP behind it. But like most WoW killers, this was also not it. It was made by BioWare before their reputation took a rather sudden and extreme nosedive due to Andromeda and Anthem, and it was a critically acclaimed game that sold over 2 million copies and peaked at over 1.6 million subscribers. Whilst those numbers disappeared faster than the Jedi during Order 66, the game went on to receive numerous phenomenal expansions and storylines that has kept the game healthy and thriving. I recently came to find out that Star Wars The Old Republic was finally being sunset, and it tugged at my heartstrings, as this game was the first MMO I had ever really cared about, and it was what turned me from being an MMO casual into the basement dweller that was always in my heart. With cinematic masterpieces that honestly deserve their own movies and some of the best storytelling in the Star Wars franchise, if not gaming in general, I decided to give Star Wars The Old Republic one more round in 2023 to see how the game holds up and relive some of those memories of a special time. It's also phenomenal value for your money. No box price, no DLCs, no expansions, no nothing. The $15 a month sub and you get everything. The first thing I was confronted with when I logged into the game was the redesign of the game's interface and intro. It had become sleeker and more streamlined. They even added a new subclass system which can now have two specs fused into one. Although the new level 1 character I made wouldn't have access to the secondary subclass till a later level, I was still able to pick it at level 1. The character creator still looks good as well considering its age and gives you many options from over a dozen races. Not that you start with all of them unlocked, as well as 4 fantastic body options. Twink, Regular, Chad, and
Warlock the Destroyer, the baddest of bitches.
I went with Regular because I'm a basic bitch, and then after tinkering a little bit, I created Courage, a light side Sith Inquisitor, an oxymoron, but it is what it is. Upon loading into the game, the story missed no beat and began immediately, and thus I was met with the abrasive and unhinged Overseer Harkon, who held a terrible grudge upon me for simply existing. As evil as Cruella de Vil, but with way less motive, Harkon would go on to test my patience and my ability to stay on the light side of the Force, because he honestly made me want to say and do some heinous shit. Yet even through his well-written but horrid character, I found a renewed interest in the story. I also found out just how much more convenient it was to play Star Wars Old Republic in 2023. Another convenient thing is that subscribe button right there that looks oh so clickable. But the first of the major conveniences was this ginormous minimap in the middle of my screen, smack dab right there, like having a Star Destroyer hovering over my shoulder. Convenient but obnoxious. In spite of its giant size, by God is it a fantastic feature, and after a little tweaking to make it smaller and in a better position on my screen, we were good to go. Before I dived into the main story, I picked up a few side quests which were quite interesting but unnecessary for me to level, as leveling had become far faster and easier, with me being able to stay well ahead of the story's level by simply doing the story itself. The very few side quests I did do pulled me even further ahead, allowing Courage to clap the cheeks of enemies who had once upon a time clapped my other character's cheeks. And all of this is thanks to the game's legacy system, which allows you to level up your account to unlock account-wide boons, buffs, and bonuses, and more to make the game easier for your alts. And the best part is you level your legacy by simply playing the game. I had a well-leveled legacy which proved to make leveling further trivial, with me sending myself several million credits from former characters I had created to buy said boons on this new character. Now none of this is necessary to level fast, and a new player won't have access to a leveled legacy, but it's still a cool feature for the game to have. Yeah, I wanted to see how fast I could level, so I stacked every modifier I could find, with 30% XP boost from class missions, 25 XP boost from an XP boost item, 10% XP boost from being in a guild, another default 20% XP for just playing the game. Although, mild side note, that default 20% XP is only for subscribers after level 20, and all of this stacked together for a whopping 85% XP boost just for doing the main story. So even without the legacy perks, you could earn 55% more XP just by being a new player. But just because you can skip the side quest doesn't mean that you should, with how well written they are, and the fact that every planet has a planetary quest chain means that you get to experience the lore, the world, the beauty that every planet has to offer. One of my favorite planetary storylines is the Drummond Car storyline, showcasing the long-lasting effects that Revan from Knights of the Old Republic 1 has left on the lore and universe. It dives into the Sith obsession with Revan and the intricacies of the Revanites lurking within the Empire's ranks. Personally, I wish it was longer, as I really adore the story and lore around Revan, but what I got was fantastic by itself. Like I said, it isn't necessary, but I wholeheartedly recommend everyone do the planetary planetary quest lines alongside the main story. Personally, I'd say do every quest you come across, but at the bare minimum, do those two, because of just how goddamn good they are. And with that tangent done, let's jump back into the main story and the Inquisitor introduction as we learn about the intricacies and bullshittery that creates Sith and how terribly rigged the situation is. Thankfully, I had the benefit of being the main character to the story, so I was safe from being a sacrifice to some B-rated villain in the making. That villain, though, was none other than Harkon and his favored prospect, Von Alth, the most generic Sith in existence. Although Von was annoying, the brewing disdain inside my heart for Harkon continued to grow day by day, as each quest he threw my way was clearly designed for me to drop dead so he didn't have to waste the energy and time killing me himself. Honestly, it made me want to write an Am I the Asshole thread on Reddit. Dear Reddit, my boss treats me like shit and keeps giving my co-workers easy tasks and then gives me impossible tasks to do, and it makes me feel really sad. Is it okay if I cast Force Lightning and commit mass terrorism inside the Sith temple? Only for Reddit to say, violence is never the answer, are you the asshole? So yeah, just ignore Reddit, but it mattered little as I went from quest to quest. I'd also like to say that the gearing is also fast and effective, with Courage getting an obscene amount of gear by simply playing the game. You can also get an outfit in which you can put modules in to upgrade your gear so you don't have to replace it every few levels. It's unnecessary, but it's an option for people who like having the same outfit the entire time they're playing so you don't look like a clown that's constantly changing colors. And then we have the companion system, and for the Sith Inquisitor, the first companion we get is Kemval, the terrifying Deshard who looks like he eats people for fun. And ironically, he really does eat people for fun. With some very threatening dialogue followed by having to beat his monstrous ass into submission, we acquired our first companion. I also must say that the Star Wars: The Old Republic companion system is phenomenal and is honestly one of my favorite parts of the game and the storyline, because each class gets 5 companions all with their own personal storylines and abilities. You can also choose from the following specs: healer, tank, and DPS, allowing your companion to do whatever you're lacking. Some of these companions are romanceable, some of them are your best friends, some of them are just cool and intimidating characters to have on your roster. The late game does add way more than 5 companions, but I'm not going to cover that as it's a whole different system of the game. But my first companion, Kemval, made it incredibly difficult to be on the light side of the Force. I couldn't so much as put a friendly smile on without getting the menacing
Kemval disapproves.
Yeah, we sidestepped his brutish disgust at positivity and enjoyed a hearty and satisfying ending to Korriban, setting the stage for Dromund Kaas, the next planet and the halfway point to the tutorial. The story's progression felt smooth, and it showed me that by being an incredibly talented, world-changing main character was all that was necessary to get ahead in life. But up to this point, I can objectively and subjectively and throw in whatever other tively you know say that the storytelling in this game is phenomenal. Whilst the tutorial story might be a little cringy, as the game keeps progressing, the story only gets better and better. And whilst I could gush and gush about how good the story in Star Wars: The Old Republic is, I won't be spoiling anything, and I would recommend you simply play the game. But if you do get spoiled, at this point that's on you. The game's been out for over a decade. Also, this script was 45 minutes long and I had to cut it down quite a bit because of just how much I talked about the story. Oh, and let's not forget the sweet perk of having a high level legacy and multiple characters, the ability to unlock all of my bag slots in record time. I refuse to play like a plebeian with limited bag space. I mean, I'm literally playing a Sith. It's practically my duty to use unfair advantages to get ahead in life and have an easier time. Whilst earning credits is pretty easy, until you level one character to max, you may be in for a small amount of struggle. But over everything else in the game, the final level of obscene convenience comes from quick travel having no cooldown and being used to zip and zoom across the entire map. Back in my day, I had to walk across the map uphill both ways, delete my character, then recreate my character just to get to where I wanted to go. But no, seriously, back in my day you had to wait 25 minutes every time you wanted to quick travel, so this is by far and most the most convenient feature to have in the game. Though I will say it did make me appreciate the world less and less by just quick traveling everywhere back and forth. So if you are a new player, don't quick travel, explore the world, to do all the planetary quest lines, do side quests, enjoy Star Wars: The Old Republic for the phenomenal and beautiful game that it really is. Though, I would like to talk about Star Wars: The Old Republic's combat system before I really go any further. The combat in Star Wars: The Old Republic is basic, being based on the standard of the time from a decade ago, but it has also, in my opinion, the worst combat system of any of the big MMOs. That's not to say that Star Wars: The Old Republic's combat system is bad, because it's not. It's just basic tab target gameplay with Star Wars flavoring sprinkled on top. But the game is easy, and the combat is relatively boring, but that's the same across the entire genre, not counting games like Black Desert Online. The tab targeting, small mob density, lack of reason to actually use skills, at least in a basic PvE sense. I'm not talking about endgame content here. The combat is just the weakest part of the game. It does look and feel great though, casting force abilities and feeling like a god amongst men. I'm sure people who play at the highest level can make the gameplay look intuitive and phenomenal, and it requires way more skill and usage of your abilities and combinations, but for someone who's dabbling long in the game, it was a mediocre experience. Keep in mind that even with heroic quests, which are more difficult than regular content, I was still for the most part unenthused about the difficulty, but again, this is just for pre-endgame content. My basic rotation depended on two scenarios. Was there one enemy or multiple? If there was one enemy, I opened up with Shock, and then I followed that up by spamming Lightning Strike until Shock got off cooldown. Sometimes I'd throw in Force Lightning if I was feeling spicy. Other classes like the Bounty Hunter felt the same, minus Force powers. If there were multiple enemies, in which case I mean 3 or 4, for the most part I just spam Force Storm over and over again until they were all dead, and then finish off whoever was left with Shock and then Lightning Strike. Overall, pretty simple fighting style, very easy, and it didn't really leave much room to do anything else unless I went out of my way to use said abilities. Oh, and I would also seethe after every few fights to regenerate health. That's right, my healing ability that I use out of combat is quite literally called Seethe. Man, too angry to die, heals to full health by raging at air. Now though, before I piss off the rest of the player base, let me move on. But please keep in mind that this is just my personal opinion, and it was still a fun experience. After we had left Korriban and traveled to the Imperial Space Station, we got a few quests introducing us to systems such as PvP, and boy was PvP fun. The 3 PvP systems are Warzones, which is a large player v player game mode, Arena, which is 4v4 tactical combat, and Starfighter, where you pilot a ship and try to dominate space. To also even out the playing field, everyone was level scaled to 80, but that doesn't quite make the game fair, since there are only 2 kinds of PvPs in Star Wars: The Old Republic, and by proxy, the entire MMO genre. People who are trying it for fun, and people who live and breathe this game mode. So allow me to introduce you to the cousins of
Gorlock the Destroyer.
all members of the notorious Hutt Cartel and looking the part, who absolutely manhandled my team across multiple game modes. They beat my team 3v4 in Arena, and we had 1 extra player and we still got rolled. They were adamant on being the baddest of bitches, and that they were. They rolled me in every PvP game I played that day, stalking me through the battlegrounds. Or there was a very limited player pool for PvP and we kept getting grouped together. Nonetheless, PvP in Star Wars: The Old Republic is a genuinely fun experience, but that's only if you can actually get into the game. I spent over 10 hours in queue across several days of playing and managed to get into a total of 11 games. Your mileage may vary, and maybe you'll have better luck with queues than I did. Whilst I was terrible at Star Wars: The Old Republic's PvP, I am an incredible pilot, so take a look at me flying a starfighter.
Satellite
Losing hull integrity. Adjusting for damage. It's been a pleasure working with you.
But the PvP was phenomenal and exhilarating, and whilst I was quite acutely terrible at it, I still had fun, even though I'm pretty sure I single-handedly lost my side of the battlegrounds. I had the Force skills of Jar Jar Binks, the hand-eye coordination of Anakin after Obi-Wan left him on the warm beaches of Mustafar, and the combat skills of C-3PO. With my PvP journey coming to a crashing end, I spared everyone else and myself further misery of my dueling ability, and I continued on with the rest of the game. Professions in Star Wars: The Old Republic are pretty simple. Actually, that's an understatement. You have your crafting and gathering professions, and your companions essentially do it for you. You pick a companion to go on a mission, as you can see here, and I would send them off and they'd come back sometime later. On a low level character like Kurash, it was a few minutes. On my higher level characters, it took around 30 minutes for them to return. It's an interesting system, but there really isn't much to talk about here, and I would say it's an overall net negative because it's a very hands-off approach to a very important system of an MMO's core gameplay loop. Housing in Star Wars: The Republic though is beautiful and fulfilling, with these massive estates across the galaxy, a penthouse in the capitals of the Sith and Republic, and the insane amount of things you can do to make your home feel like a home. My own home from when I played back in the day was okay, middle class I'd say, upper if I'm feeling fancy. In fact, housing, cosmetics and mounts are pretty similar to real life. Most people look poor or have sad houses, outfits and cars. Some people on the other hand have the hard cash to dress up in Gucci and Balenciaga, drive a Ferrari and have a gorgeous and decked out mansion. You can get cosmetics, mounts and housing stuff by just playing the game, but some of the more gorgeous outfits, cosmetics and mounts are cash shop only. But you do get a lot of things for simply just playing the game, so you don't have to spend any money at all. But some of the things really make you wanna, like the Anakin outfit or the Obi-Wan outfit. I almost spent the money myself. They almost had me. Almost. Then we have operations and flashpoints, otherwise known as raids and dungeons, which are not something I had enough time to fully explore and delve into, but I was able to do a lot of dungeons solo, and that's a great feature, which makes it so you can experience the story of dungeons without needing a group, especially low level content, or for those players who just want the story and don't care about rushing through the content like most dungeon groups do. Flashpoints are quite fun, and the storylines in them are entertaining and make you care about the location and reasons, and the queue times for finding groups is for the most part pretty fast, plus the fact that they're fully voice acted and you can have an impact on the outcome makes it feel quite rewarding. I cannot say much about operations as I'm not geared enough nor good enough to really dive into them, but from what I've seen and discovered, it's a fun game mode that is difficult to get into due to most competent guilds being closed off and pugs being questionable at best. That one isn't a Star Wars: The Old Republic problem, that one is an MMO genre problem. Yet it is still doable doable, but this video would take a few more weeks if not months to make if I try to get good enough to get into raiding. Now though, it's time to talk about all the cons of the game after I spent quite some time gushing over just how fun the game is. Some of you may not agree with my opinions, and that's fine, but these are my opinions, so put your pitchforks down and get your hateful comments ready. PvP, as I talked about earlier, was genuinely fun but a very unbalanced experience. There was no fun and equal battle. One side just completely dumpsters the other one, and that was my experience for every PvP match I played. I played 11 games on Courage, and all 11 were one-sided dumpstering. On my other tunes spread across all levels, I also played about 20 other games, and all of those were also completely one-sided, minus one game total in which it was an equal and hard-earned loss. Now, a sample of 30 games, give or take, isn't a massive sample size, but that's a lot of games to be completely dumpstered on or completely dumpstered on others for one person. The biggest downside though is not that the games were unbalanced, it's that the queue times were very unreliable. Unless you played on certain hours or days, which I can't pinpoint exactly, you could be waiting 15 to 60 minutes per game, if not longer in some cases. Queue sizes this long are very detrimental to a healthy PvP scene unless you have stuff that needs to be done around the house, then it's actually really helpful. The combat wasn't bad, but it was boring and didn't feel intuitive or fun to play with. It did its job just fine, but I do think the game is simply dated in this regard. I am no incredible content designer, so I'm not gonna say what I think could make it better. As it is, it's an okay combat system. You can backtrack to the combat segment before to get my full opinion. Overall, 5 out of 10. Due to no fault of its own, but just the genre in general. The housing and guild system, as I said, is phenomenal. It felt great to decorate my estate. It was difficult, mind you, because of how much time and effort it took, but it was fun. I don't know how hard this would be for a new player without a legacy, hundreds of millions of credits, and multiple maxed out characters, because even my one house wasn't decked out, and I've got thousands of hours in game over the past decade. Then we have the guild system with its buffs, and the guild flagship itself, which for the Imperials is this beautiful Imperial Dreadnought, and it's phenomenal. I will say though, it was somewhat of an overall disappointing experience as I jumped between a few guilds, and for the most part, all of them felt dead. There wasn't a sense of community or signs of liveliness, and most people simply never talked, even in guilds with hundreds of people. There are absolutely tons of guilds with an active and thriving community, but alas, I, with my measly 50 hours on my latest tune, did not get into one of these said guilds. And if it was lonely for me, imagine how daunting and lonely it would be for a new player. And sadly, the game is kinda dead, so it makes it a bit sad to play. It's the deadest of the big MMOs, and I wish that was different because I love this game. Although it makes sense why EA is finally sunsetting the game and sending it to the retirement home. Though, for clarification standpoint, the game still averages over 100,000 unique monthly plays, which is quite a lot of people, but in comparison to other MMOs, it's low. For some reason, if a game doesn't have 300,000 to 500,000 active monthly players, it's a dead game. Not sure where that mental stereotype comes from, but it is what it is. Once people believe a game is dead, there is no recovery from that spiral for the most part. I wish you could have a grander life like WoW, ESO, or Final Fantasy XIV, but sometimes games were just meant to enjoy their retirement and not work forever. Until it finally turns the lights off, it'll always be a great comfort game for me. Overall, I would recommend everyone give Star Wars: The Old Republic a fair try for the story alone, as it is a phenomenal experience, and the storytelling holds up incredibly well in the modern era, but the gameplay, the player base, and the graphics have fallen behind the times. There is plenty of content here for new players and returning players alike to have a grand time, but I do not see this becoming many people's new main MMO, and I do not see this MMO making a massive comeback, though I wish it did. With all that said, what MMO do you think I should check out next? If you enjoyed the video and liked my take on Star Wars: The Old Republic, please subscribe and like the video. If you hated the video and despised my take on Star Wars: The Old Republic, please subscribe and like the video so you can hate my next one too. If you're interested in the future of classic WoW in 2024, check out this video right here. Otherwise, thank you all for watching. Ebonhard out.